We did it! There it is. Hello! Welcome, everyone, hanging out with us tonight. My name is Danielle, and you are here hanging out at the Padawan Chronicles. This is new for me, so these intros are weird. I had a script, and now I just totally forgot it, so it's completely out of my head. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my special guest for tonight, Mr. Jake Berlin. What's up, Jake?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk more Star Wars.
Yeah, me too. It is very exciting to talk about Star Wars. So for everyone who is new here, welcome. The Padawan Chronicles are basically me going through my journey, learning a little bit more about Star Wars. What I know about Star Wars is I've seen all of the movies. Anything that has come out theatrically, I have watched. I just recently watched Rebels. Like, I just finished Rebels a couple of weeks ago. So good. I loved it so much. And then I watched Clone Wars earlier this year. And then I just started reading some of the books. So
yeah, I'm jealous because you're watching it all for the first time. And I actually watch Clone Wars like on repeat almost constantly, whether it's like falling asleep to or it's like in the background noise or something. So I'm really jealous that it is the first time because it's such a good experience.
Yeah, it really is really invigorating to get refreshed inside of this. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I was just a movie watcher. It wasn't until I really got into the place that you and I are common with in the Schmodown
Yep.
world.
Yep.
So it wasn't until Ken Knapsack released his book, Why We Love Star Wars. I bought it on audiobook. Yes, I don't have a physical copy of it, but I have it on audio. And I would listen to it to go to sleep because I never felt like I needed to be avoid spoilers for anything, just because it was already something that I was into. And I don't want to say that I didn't care about the franchise, but I wasn't as into it.
Yeah.
So I started listening to the book and it just hooked me. Like the way that Ken would talk and speak about Star Wars and some of these characters and some of the stuff that just goes along in this universe, in this galaxy, just completely grabbed me by the balls sorry. And
you're good. It makes sense.
I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. Also, Song of Ice and Fire, getting into that world was a big thing for me. So knowing that there's so much more about Star Wars that I can learn about felt fun. So
yeah, no, and Ken, to your point, Ken has a great voice to listen to Star Wars in. He's one of the most positive about it, which is why it's a great introduction to those who may not know what it is. And to your Game of Thrones point, it's really cool because there's so much background outside of just canon with the legends and everything. There's literally endless stories that you can go to, which is really cool.
Right. I'm very scared to get into canon stuff. Like I'm sorry, legend stuff. Like
Legends is wild. Legends is wild.
I have seen that section in Barnes and Noble, and it's bigger than my bookshelf. So.
Yep. There's a lot of it. There is a lot of it. That's for sure.
Yeah. So if you are watching this on a playback, hello and welcome. Like, comment, and subscribe. This is a live stream right now. So I want to give a shout out to everyone in the chat. Thank you all so much for coming in, helping out, supporting your girl. I really do appreciate it. Dean Morgan, Brandy Parker, Jeremy Miller, Level 2 Trading, Malcolm, Danny, Jake Yakabetta up in the chat. Oh my goodness, y'all. I love you all so much. Steve, Movie Fenobi is up in there. Weston Iro. Y'all are some good ones. Really, really appreciate y'all coming in and hanging out tonight. Bum. So we are talking about The Mandalorian. So The Mandalorian was fun for me to get into because last week's episode, we're also doing this kind of for me, myself, the way that this is, we're on episode 6, and this is the first show that I'm doing. So whoopsie. But I really wanted to start it last week because last week made me feel like I know about Star Wars. I know who Ahsoka Tano was. I kind of knew about Morai, because I just finished Rebels. So that was the only way but I didn't notice it until it was pointed out. I just know of the character. And so a lot of that, I know who Thrawn was and all of that. So that episode made me feel like I know about Star Wars. This week's episode made me feel like I know nothing about Star Wars.
Complete flip. Yeah.
Yes, and I absolutely loved it. So, Jake, just your overall thoughts. How did you feel about this week's episode?
So as you can tell, Boba is sitting back there with me hanging out. I have been a Boba Fett fan for as long as I can remember. And I talked to a lot of people about this just because when it comes to the movies, Boba has a very bad rap. And he has gotten a very bad rap over the last like 10 years or so because of the way he went out in the original trilogy. His character wasn't really like that cool in the original trilogy. He just looked cool, but he wasn't that cool. I have a history with him because of Legends. I think the character is incredible. And it was very gratifying because I was watching this episode, not only just being blown away and hearing and seeing the Slave One on screen again, but seeing Boba on screen again, but also realizing all of these people who are watching this right now are finally understanding why I love Boba Fett so much. Like, all of those people who had never read Legends or anything, or don't read the current comic books or anything like that, they're finally getting to experience my love for Boba Fett and why he's so cool. It's not in his prime, but they did such a great job with him. And then all of the other stuff that happens as well, because it's so connected to so many different things. It was just brilliant. It was really brilliant. And the fact that it was only 30 minutes long is even more crazy. We've talked about it a lot, but Mandalorian has done this thing where they do like a big giant episode and then they take one off, and they do a big giant episode, they take one off. They did a big giant episode last week, and then they followed it up with even a bigger episode this week. Yeah. So it's kind of like a shell shock, and I enjoyed it so much.
I feel like they've packed in a lot in this season so far because even
they
with
have done so much.
Yeah, even with the kind of sister episode to this one, which we'll talk about later on, with last season, everyone kind of considered that specific episode to maybe be filler. Yep. Now we're finding out that it's probably not. It meant something. So definitely excited about all of that. Getting into the show really quickly. Oh, first and foremost, Boba Fett has always been my favorite character also. But like I said, I was not really deep into the lore, so I don't know anything about Boba Fett in Legends. He was just this cool looking dude. I watched the original trilogy when I was a lot younger. So it was still in like a kid mind frame, and for whatever reason, Boba Fett I thought he was super cool. I always thought he was really cool. Yeah. And then getting into the movies later, I didn't realize that many people hated the way that he died.
So many people hate it. So many people think he's overrated, and you know what? All those people are not saying a single thing now.
No, they're not. No, there's some interesting theories about that also that I want to get in with you. But let's get into the show really quick. So the way that the show starts off with Din and Grogu. Oh my gosh, love the name. I love Grogu. First, do you like Grogu or do you not?
I do like Grogu. It's definitely grown on me. I know a lot of people are struggling with saying it. I still like the name, or I still like when he calls him Kid. Yeah. I think that's the one that I want to continue to hear, but I do like Grogu. And then it also works because when he says Grogu, he has this little sound that he makes when his name is said, and it kind of just fits in perfectly.
It really does. I love what they're doing with the character of Grogu and using those sort of sound effects to help understand what he's going through and what he means. I know sometimes it can seem a little kitschy, but I still think that it works, and it should be something that we need to be able to understand this child. Yep. So the first scene is Grogu and Din hanging out in the Razor Crest, chilling, learning about the Force. My question for you, Jake, is about the Force. So Grogu is a Force-sensitive being, and I believe that we learned in the last episode that he was actually training at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Am I right on that?
Yep.
Okay. I know a planet! So we know that he was training there for a little while before Order 66 was taken out. So we know that he survived. When it comes to Padawan training at the Jedi temples, like, is there a certain curriculum? Like, are there like levels to certain Jedi training?
There definitely are kind of like steps that they take. We've only seen a little bit of it on screen. Not very much in the prequel trilogy. There were kind of moments where like characters were talking and stuff was kind of going on in the background. We would see some of their training, like they would, have blast shields on and they'd be using their lightsabers and stuff like that. We saw some of it in Clone Wars, and they did a little bit. They embraced it more in that, but still, we have yet to see a lot of the Padawan training. The Padawan training that we've seen is in the field. The Obi-Wan and Phantom Menace, Anakin and Attack of the Clones, like that type of stuff. When it comes down to the younglings, that's different because we've only seen stuff in background. So we don't really know exactly how far he could have been. And it's interesting because Ahsoka had said that he had been training with multiple masters, which means that probably at that age, it's much more like a school where they kind of like trickle around to different masters and kind of get different, feelings for, because each Jedi is different from, they all have different powers too. Some can embrace this certain power, some can embrace this certain power. So that maybe that's what's going on, but we still are very much in the dark on what younglings exactly go through as young Jedi.
That's very interesting to me because I do know that they are releasing new High Republic books next year. So I'm wondering if they might get into any of that sort of Jedi training.
I hope so.
Specifically.
Yeah, I hope so. It's going to be very different because we know that it's being described as this is kind of the Jedi at the height of who they are. And there's been a lot of conversation over the last decade or so that the Jedi in the prequels were very corrupt and they were very blinded by what was going on. None of that will be happening during the High Republic. And so it's going to be a very different dynamic. They're going to be very, very different Jedi. It's also going to be a little different because it's not going to be actually seeing it on screen. It's all going to be through pages and listening and stuff like that. But I do hope that we do see that because it's a very cool aspect. And we know that Yoda's going to be in it. Yeah. And he's obviously one that's been training Jedi for 900 or 800 years. So it would make sense for them to show something like that.
That would be fun. I would like to see Yoda in the books. In the books that I've read so far, he hasn't popped up in it yet. But
yeah,
that would be a lot of fun. So we're watching Din and Grogu train with the Force. We hear another Dank Farrik. Have you started using Dank Farrik in your everyday life now?
No, because I want to. Like I blatantly tried to use it because I think it's such a cool saying, but I always mess up when I say it. It's such a weird thing to say like in real life. And so, but I think it's a brilliant thing. I'm interested to one day learn, or if we ever do learn, what it actually means, or if it's like a curse word in that type of world or something. But I think it's such a great addition for what Din is and the kind of character he is.
Absolutely. I thought it was really fun whenever Din was referring to Ahsoka Tano as the nice lady.
Yep. That's great. And because he barely knows her, but she helped him enough for him to trust him. Or for he to trust her, I should say, because he has a lot of trust issues. But that's obviously the soft spot when it comes to Grogu. You help Grogu, you help Din, and you kind of get into the circle with Din. And she is now known as the nice lady to everybody.
She is the nice lady. I love that. So I hope the next Popo Funk Ahsoka doll we get, it just says the nice lady.
I hope that'd be amazing.
That would be great. So it sounds from the conversation that Din and Grogu are having, it really sounds like Din's kind of preparing him to be separated, preparing Grogu to be separated from him. He tells him whenever you go to the Seeing Stone, if a Jedi comes, and you have to be ready to leave. Do you think that Din is doing that more so for himself?
That it's an interesting question. It's very, because we even saw it in the Ahsoka episode at the very end. He was essentially packing up Grogu's goods to give to Ahsoka. Like he was ready to essentially just hand him off and be like, look, I can't deal with this kid. I don't know what's going on. Like I need someone to be able to make sure he's okay. As much as he loves him, I think Din's kind of taking that high road of like, well, if I can't give him what he needs, someone else can. But I think this episode, it's interesting. I do think that he was kind of setting him up to be like, okay, if a Jedi does come, I'm going to give him away essentially and let a Jedi train him or protect him like I can't, give him what he needs. But I think this episode, on top of a lot of other things, kind of made Din realize that he needs Grogu more than he realized before. Having him taken away, and we'll talk about that, but having him taken away could have had a lot more to say than it actually did on screen. Because it would be weird for him to just be like, when the Jedi ever comes, be like, okay, here's Grogu. And it's just like an easy transfer. After all they've been through, it'd be very weird. So I kind of feel like in the moment, he's not going to be able to do it. But the transition into that is going to be very fun to see.
I think so as well. did seem like he was just trying to prep themselves both mentally for that initial separation. Then we see them fly into Tython. I'm saying that right?
You are. Yep.
Flying into Tython. I've only seen pictures of this planet in little random clips that I've seen on YouTube going over some canon stuff. And I always assumed that Tython was a snow planet. Like it just had a different climate than what we saw on the screen. Now, when it comes to like maps are also a big thing for me. I love maps, but I am staying as far away from a Star Wars map as I can right now because I feel like I would just get completely lost.
There's a lot. It's a lot. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea what that little. I need to sit down in that class that they had in the last few episodes so I can understand what the Outer Rim is.
Exactly.
Yeah. How familiar are you with some of the planets in the galaxy and the overall galaxy that it's set in?
I'm familiar enough. I know enough of from watching and reading and doing the comic books and stuff like that. I know where stuff is placed. I know the Outer Rim, the Inner Rim, the core, the Deep Core. I know that you said that you had seen clips of like images of Tython. That being from the Dr. Aphra comic, which is the only other time we ever seen it in canon. And the key there is that they actually went to what was called the ice cap of Tython. So it's. And obviously, ice cap could mean a bunch of different things, and it could just be like a center point for the planet or this side of the planet. We could very well be seeing the first planet in Star Wars that has multiple seasons, which was never happened before. So maybe they landed on this planet during a time of the year that just so happened to be this kind of season. But there's also the fact that in Legends. Or it might be in the Dr. Aphra comic. I'm not sure. I haven't read it in a while. But Tython was supposed to exist in what's called the Deep Core. So essentially the center of the Star Wars galaxy. And what we know about the Deep Core is that it's extremely hard terrain to get to. Like a lot of people die on their way to get there. And the reason why it's interesting is because if that was the case, you wouldn't think that, first of all, Din would be able to get there super easily. Boba would be able to get there super easily, and the Empire would be able to get there super easily. Right. So there's a big question of maybe they're retconning where the planet actually is in the galaxy because it's only appeared once. It was a very small appearance. So maybe they're putting it somewhere in another part of the galaxy that it allows it to have that season. The second option is, and this is where science comes involved, and I'm not involved in science at all, but what does the orbit of Star Wars galaxy look like?
Right?
Can the planet shift? Do certain planets shift to where that gives it multiple seasons, or maybe one side of the planet is this and the other side of the planet is this? It's very interesting, but I will say because of the importance of the Seeing Rock or the Seeing Stone, and the fact that they essentially retconned, which isn't official yet, but retconned the season and everything. I don't think it's the last time we see Tython. I do think it can kind of become like a home base almost. And the interesting thing is that if you go back to Legends, this is getting so deep into stuff.
I love it. But we're here for it.
If you go back to Legends, Tython is actually the birthplace of the very first temple in Star Wars. And we know that in canon, that actually belongs to Octo. Where Luke was in the sequel trilogy. So that island that Luke was on, that actually is officially the first official ever Jedi temple that in canon. Now, the key here is that the birthplace of the Order actually was what's called an order before they actually called the Jedi. They were called the Jedi.
Yeah.
The Jedi.
And the apostrophe of two eyes, right?
Yeah, so it's a little different. And for those of you who don't know, and this is so deep in Star Wars, the Jedi essentially created the light and the dark side. That's where it came from. It was all kind of one thing at that time, and the Jedi Order at one point just like split off after a big civil war between the group, and that's how the light and the dark side came to be. And that all took place on Tython, which is why it's so important in Legends, and people are maybe thinking that it may be so important in future Star Wars as well, because and there you go. So, and that would make sense. And look, we've seen it happen before with retconning stuff. They've retconned small things, and it's a small enough thing to where they can retcon it and it not be so significant to where people worry about it. And I'm all for it. Like, I'm cool for it. Maybe it's a place we go to more. But it does make sense because they kind of established that Octo was the first Jedi Temple in canon, and so they would need to shift it a little bit for Tython.
Yeah, shout out to William Harold in the chat for
thank you.
letting us know. Yeah, I just recently got the Star Wars Encyclopedia. It was published
good.
It's so good. Oh my gosh, I got lost in it yesterday. It was published in 2017, so there's no Tython on that map. There's not a Tython on that map, so I thought that was interesting. I'm also, I think I asked a friend of both of ours, Paul Denuzio, who is also an avid Star Wars fan. I think I asked him if Doc Aphra was canon, and Doc Aphra is technically canon, right?
Yep.
I don't know for sure when those comics came out.
So everything after the official purchase, 2012, is canon, and both Dr. Aphra runs came. The first one came out around I want to say 2014, maybe 2013. And then the most recent one started up last year. So they're both canon.
Maybe it's not on the map because at that point it was still deep core, and it would be the way that the map is set up, the core is super bright.
That or Tython in canon might not have been created yet in the new canon by the time that book was made.
Oh, okay. That makes sense too.
Yeah.
Does that sometimes confuse you, as a Star Wars fan, especially if Legends is something that you've gone in with? I know that you don't ever have you're not doing Star Wars trivia on a movie trivia channel or anything like that. But does that ever mess with you whenever you're watching anything? Are you watching something that you know is canon and in your brain is Legends did it better?
It has a couple times, but the only thing that comes to mind when I sit down, the Tython situation, when I know of Tython, or when we get to the Dark Troopers later, that also comes into play as well. The first thing always in my head that pops in is says, well, this is kind of a Star Wars thing. They retcon a lot. They retcon a lot of stuff, and they have in their entire history, and they continue to do so. And we'll talk about the Boba Fett thing with Jango. I mean, that's a full-on retcon. And they've done that 3 or 4 times with that character. And so I first think to myself, well, that's just a Star Wars thing. And then second of all, I think to myself, well, if they do this, there better be a payoff and there better be an answer. And if there isn't, and then I start to question myself if it doesn't ever come. So but being with The Mandalorian and how well the story's been told, I expect it to be explained. And so I'm not too worried about it. If it was the movies, it'd be a different situation because we've had trouble with that in these movies recently.
Yeah.
But as far as Mando goes, I'm not too worried about it.
That's good. Good. I am very much enjoying this story. Another thing with it, so they get to Tython, they're going over there, hanging out, taking Grogu to the Seeing Stone. I've never heard of the Seeing Stone before. Yes, I have seen Rise of Skywalker and the prequel, or the prequel trilogies. No, I'm sorry, the sequel trilogies, forgetting words. I did not know that whatever Luke was on, if that was considered a Seeing Stone. I'm sure it's considered a Seeing Stone, but I don't ever remember it being called that.
Yeah, it was never called, but I saw, doing research and stuff like that myself, watching videos. A lot of people called back to it. The fact that it could be that. Maybe that's an attribute of a Jedi Temple that we didn't know about, and they just officially gave it a name. And maybe we've seen it in Star Wars before, but we never really recognized it or paid attention to it until now. But it does seem like Luke had his own version, especially if Octo was the very first Jedi Temple. Let's say Tython has a very early on Jedi Temple. Maybe that's something of that branch of Jedi, that version of Jedi that was kind of lost in transition over the years. Mm-hmm. But it does seem like Luke did have one there, and that they are. I mean, that thing is awesome.
Yeah.
The thing's done. It seems like it's very important. It seems like it's a giant beacon to connect Jedi through. Yeah, I mean, look at that. That's so cool.
Yeah,
with the writing that pops up on the stone and everything. The fact that it's just, and pun intended here, force field, it's a full on just blockage of anything coming in. So it's very interesting. And this show continues to kind of bring up ideas that you never thought about before, even though you've seen them before. And that's why everybody's enjoying it so much, because the storytelling is off the charts good.
Yeah. So the writing that's underneath in that scene, so let me bring that picture back up really quickly. That's Jedi writing. Is there any other term for it? Am I forgetting the right?
Yeah, it's some kind of ancient language, and I don't know if it'll ever be explained. Maybe it's just something that pops up with the beam. But it doesn't seem like it's anything that's important at this time. Maybe it's just some kind of connective tissue between the beam and the rock. But yeah, it does seem like some kind of ancient language that was there before.
I know that with that specific one with the rock, there were people that were trying to decipher what was on it. A lot of people couldn't crack it because they said that it was strategically placed where you couldn't really see it. Some people are guessing maybe it's the Jedi code. Is that the right word for it?
It would make sense. Yeah, that is. It would make sense. It's very possible that is the case, but I don't expect it to be a thing personally. Because there's another code in this episode that's much more important. Yeah. And I don't know if we'll ever get back to something this like Jedi-ish in this show. So
yeah. Well, shout out to Jeremiah Morris in the chat because Jeremiah Morris just put words in here that I have no idea what any of that means.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah, just a character we haven't seen very much of.
Hong Krell?
Yeah, Clone Wars character. Yeah.
Nice. Very, very cool. What's up, Jerry? Love a Jerry up in here. So, on the Scene Stone, are you ever tempted to figure out what any of that stuff is? For me, like I like the mystery behind not knowing some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So do you ever try to decipher any of it?
The only thing I deciphered, and it wasn't by choice, is because another buddy was totally geeking out about it for me, was the chain code from Boba. Yeah. But most of the time I like the mystery. Plus I like to find out within the show. Over the last couple years, if they do explain it, if they don't explain it, then I know for myself it's not important. And so I don't need to go searching for it. But if they do explain it, I like to be surprised by it. And I've a lot lately, especially with television, I've done a really good job of staying away from like trailers and researching because if it is that important to the show, they will explain it at some point, and I don't want to know ahead of time.
Yeah, I want to touch back on that also with the intro, not the intro to the episode, but the what you missed
previously on.
Those were the words that I couldn't find on the previously on. So, but before we get to that, going back to the Scene Stone, there was one thing that really stood out to me, and I did a tiny bit of research on it, but I didn't want to get too far into it. But it did seem like it was something important, and I felt that as some not knowing anything behind it, and it's these little butterflies. These butterflies that are around the Scene Stone, I saw them and was immediately drawn to it. And I will say that it did kind of catch my attention because if anyone is familiar with anyone who else is doing Star Wars content out there, Laura Kelly runs a Star Wars podcast called The Toast Force. She is also a competitor on the Movie Trivia Schmodown in the Star Wars division. She has a little blue butterfly in her name. And I know a lot of people usually associate little emojis and stuff like that to their name, to things that they're into. So that's kind of why I was like, do butterflies mean something? And then I kind of looked into what it was. So I want to know how you feel about these little blue buddies.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's a complete Dave Filoni thing to do. I know that Robert Rodriguez directed it, and I don't know if he wrote it or not. I'm not 100% sure on that one. But Dave Filoni doing most of the work with Favreau. He has done this multiple times, whether it's Rebels, whether it's Clone Wars, where he plants stuff with no context, with no explanation, and then eventually it comes back into play. Now, for those of you who don't know, the blue butterflies are essentially a incarnation of the light side of the Force, and they were seen in, I want to say, the Darth Vader comic book. If I'm not mistaken,
yes,
where Anakin or Vader, I should say, where Vader essentially goes through this wild vision and he learns of where he came from. He learns of what Palpatine has done, essentially. A very, very great comic book. I highly recommend. But that was the first time we had ever seen it. And it was a incarnation of the light side of the Force. It's really cool because it means good things for Grogu, obviously. We've seen him tempt with dark side stuff and we learned that he forgot who he was and he forgot the training he had, and that makes sense. But it's good things because that means that the light side of the Force is surrounding him, that he's tapping into it like Ahsoka said he would, and I would not be surprised if they come back in some fashion. I'm interested more in the fact that if they're like native to certain places or if they manifest when someone really taps into the Force in that situation.
Ooh, and those could that possibly just be like a space where they manifest in, because that whole space could just be super Force positive?
Possibly, yeah, like that type of situation, or even when like Luke on his stone in The Last Jedi. Not that we were ever going to see him in any type of movie, but in that type of situation, or just a Jedi in general who's like really tapping in and like channeling the Force and being one with the Force. Maybe it's this thing where these just kind of manifest through that ability, or maybe it's something that's with certain Jedi. We've seen it where Jedi have certain powers from other people, like they tap into certain abilities, and maybe it's just specific to certain Force users, and that could very well be Grogu.
Nice. I love that. The only thing that I can think of, like if I had to theorize anything right now, because they showed up to Vader and because there's a lot of this chit chat about Grogu tapping into the dark side just a little bit. What if it's so I mean, you already basically said it, this sort of someone who's in the dark side, but like the light side trying to get them back.
And that is very possible, because the only other time we've seen it is when they were with Vader. Yeah. And he was in a very, very dark state when they did show up. It's very possible and I know a lot of people may think that he was having some kind of vision, and that he was seeing something, and maybe we'll see it in the future. But I personally think that he was just kind of like inside the Force, and that he was essentially like shooting a beacon out to whatever Jedi was going to listen or feel it. But if we ever do see a vision from him, if they ever do explain that, I feel like that's kind of where the butterflies would come back into play. It would be interesting to see if it's a dark vision, because if that is the case, that can mean very big things for Grogu.
It really can. Oh my goodness. And that little scene did kind of give us the best image of the entire episode. And that's
look at his little fingers. Let's look at it. He is so in tune with the Force right now. It's incredible.
Look at those little fingies. I love this character.
It's so good.
So much. It really is. That's earlier before this, I was kind of tuning in to Mark Riley's Cantina episode, and Mark Fernandez was on there, and what he was saying about dang it, I totally forgot this happens sometimes. I apologize to anyone who is new to me being on camera. I will be in a solid train of thought, and then all of a sudden it's just gonna go away, and I can't remember exactly what it was about Baby Yoda and the Force and his little fingies that I was talking about. So I'm just gonna move on.
He is so in tune with what he's doing right now.
Yeah, he is into it, man. All right. So moving on from that. So this is while he is tuning into the Force, Din is watching out for him. And then all of a sudden we see something that I'm sure a lot of Star Wars fans immediately jumped up out of their seats. This is the moment that I figured out that I know nothing about Star Wars, because I did not recognize Slave One. I did not recognize it at all. I didn't. So I didn't get that feeling until he actually popped out with Fennec, and oh my goodness. So how did you feel seeing Slave One come back on the screen?
So it's so big for multiple reasons. One, the Slave One is my all-time favorite Star Wars ship. Always has been, always will be. I think it's so unique and different. The sound effect that they give to the ship is absolutely incredible. With that said, I was completely blown out of the water that Slave One was in this episode. Completely blown away. And I'm so mad at myself that I didn't recognize it right away, because I'm such a big fan. But there's a reason for that, because when we saw Boba in the first episode, he seemed like a guy who didn't have anything. He seemed like this outlander who was, maybe just kind of out on his own, or maybe he was choosing to be that way, and that he didn't have his armor, that he didn't have a ship. Well, lo and behold, we realize that he does in fact have a ship. And he's been doing his thing all this time, just never got his armor back. So when I saw Slave One, I jumped up. I watched it at 1 a.m. I remember specifically where I was. I was kind of groggy still. I woke up about 10 minutes before the episode. I watched it. And the second Slave One popped in, I was up and at him. It's like I just woke up and just full on ready to go. because that ship is so incredible. It is so unique and different from Star Wars in general. I also think because of what happened this episode, we could be seeing a lot more of it down the road. So
I think so also. Ships have never been anything. There's a lot of the lore and a lot of really random things that there's so like different types of lightsabers, even fighting styles.
Star Wars is nuts. Star Wars is nuts.
There's so much. So I am ashamed that it was Slave One that I didn't recognize, but I'm also not going to knock myself too much because ships are not my thing. I just remembered like what the Ghost looks like. Like that's the only ship that I know.
That's fair.
And Millennium Falcon, obviously, because it's the ship of it. So this whole entire episode, because of everything that everyone was talking about last week, I was patiently waiting for the Ghost to show up.
I would absolutely lose it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I would lose it so bad if the Ghost showed up and Hera walked down that ramp. Oh.
Yes. That was what I was hoping for. I'm hoping that we do kind of get a little Jason tie-in also. Like I would like to see Jason Syndulla somewhere. I don't know anything else about it, but
that'd be very interesting.
So the Force is not hereditary, right?
From what we know, no. But from what Rebels at the very end of Rebels, from what Sabine, her monologue was talking about, or her voiceover, I should say, she had said that he is more like his father, or she had said, and we all know who his father is, meaning he probably has some kind of Force abilities within him. And I'm of the believer that the Force is actually in everybody, but it has to be tapped into, and you have to be at a certain, whether it's light or dark, you have to be at a certain level to kind of hit it. It's very much similar to like The Walking Dead, where the virus is in everybody, but it's just tapped into certain people. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like everybody has it, but only certain people are able to use it. And, being that he's Hera's son and Kanan's son, I would feel like they would at least attempt that. And if the whole Ezra thing plans out, it would make sense. It'd be a very cool circle if Ezra was Kanan's Padawan and Jason becomes Ezra's Padawan.
I would love that.
It would be very, very cool to see that. And it would make a lot of sense. It would definitely make a lot of sense.
That would be cool. And we've seen them do Twi'leks, however anyone don't for me.
They pronounce them both ways. Yeah, you're fine.
Pronunciation with it. We've already seen them do Twi'leks on the show before, so we know that they can do them very well. Yes. So I'm excited to see that also. So Slave One coming in. So how do you think he kept Slave? What do you think he was doing with Slave One?
That's the big question. But I do think that they're going to keep it a mystery because there's been a lot of rumors about a Boba Fett miniseries, a limited series, a la Obi-Wan. They're doing the one season, and then they're probably going to call it quits. Just tell the one story. I have a feeling they'll do that between the 5 years that we saw him in the Mando episode 1 this season and the last time we saw him Return of the Jedi. I have a feeling they're going to tell that story in there along with a lot of other stuff. So don't expect to see it in Mando. Probably if the Boba Fett thing does become official, which stay tuned because Disney is supposed to be releasing a lot of stuff on Thursday, Star Wars, Marvel, and Pixar. Yeah. And it could become official on Thursday. But I do feel like if they ever do a Boba Fett thing on Disney Plus, they'll probably explain it then.
Yeah, and I just want to point this out in the chat. Weston, that's a big spoiler, and I know he's talking about Jason, and I do apologize about that. I should have definitely warned for spoilers.
It's hard, but Rebels has been open for a while, and I get it. It's tough, but it's a minor thing. It's super, super small, and it'll have bigger dividends in the future if what is going to happen or what we want to happen is going to happen.
Right. Yes. Boba Fett. Let's talk about Boba Fett. We both said that we enjoyed Boba Fett as a character, growing up, all of that good stuff. He was always just a really cool dude, and I love the Western aspect of having Boba Fett in there. He was great. So Boba Fett coming down, he talked about Cobb Vanth. And recognizing that Cobb Vanth had the armor before Din took it from Cobb. Why do you think he held back from getting it? So I'm thinking timeline wise, because the timeline in Star Wars is also where I have to figure out like what like when is I didn't really recognize that Zero BBY is basically a New Hope and not the Last Jedi or Return of the Jedi. So those years kind of threw me off for a little bit, and that's where I'm just trying to figure out how long has it been since Jedi, and how long between this time, how long was Boba Fett on Tatooine like that? And why wouldn't he take it from Cobb Vanth? Because we can clearly see he's a badass.
Yeah, it's interesting because before this, I would have said, oh, Boba Fett's probably been on Tatooine this entire time. He's probably been searching for his armor. And, being how big Tatooine is, we see that there's 3 main settlements. It'd be hard to find the armor. So maybe he just couldn't find it, and he's been. I love the theory that he was essentially living as one of the Tusken Raiders, which is why he had the weapons, and he was essentially became one of them, which would have been really cool. But after seeing that he had the Slave One, that means that he could have been anywhere at any time. For the past 5 years, he could have gone anywhere he wanted to. So after knowing that, I'm starting to believe that he saw what Cobb Vanth was using the armor for, in that he was protecting a town, he was using it for good use, and that the Empire was gone. He didn't really need it anymore. There wasn't any kind of dire situation that he was, needing it for.
And so Boba Fett still kind of has clout in the galaxy, right? Like, people know who he is, recognize that armor. Exactly.
And so I'm in the minority when I think that Boba was actually watching from a distance and letting Cobb use it.
Chris Adams in the chat says, I think Boba is really wanting to make up for past sins and saw Cobb doing some good with it.
Exactly. And so I see him kind of looking on a distance, okay, like my armor is being used for good. That's fine. But the second it got taken from a Mandalorian, that's where it goes different, because Boba doesn't have good history with Mandos. He doesn't have good history with Mandalorians. And so, and we know the whole deal with Beskar and Mandalorians and how important it is, and that now we're starting to learn about the Mandalorian Civil War and these different factions and all this type of stuff. And so it would make sense to be like, okay, this guy's trying to do good for his town. I'm going to let him use the armor. But the second he saw Din take it, he's like, okay, not good. I'm getting my armor back. And now he's been chasing him this whole time until he finally caught up with him.
Yeah, and Boba Fett says this line that I instantly recognized, and I was very proud of myself for recognizing, and then realized that I still didn't get the quote all the way right. Anyways, it was, I'm a simple man making his way through the galaxy like my father before me. But when Jango says it, he says the universe.
He says he's a universe instead of galaxy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so good. It's such a good callback.
Was.
And we've seen this multiple times throughout, not just The Mandalorian, but the sequel trilogy as well. They're doing honor to the prequels. Like, they're bringing them back into the fold. And the prequels were like, the runt of Star Wars for so long.
Yes.
And now they're starting to finally get this respect. And this is such a great callback. And it also, to me, and we might talk about this a little bit later on, but it actually could be a bigger line than we realize, depending on what kind of fate Boba actually has in the series.
Interesting. I like that. I'm just going to talk about it now just because I don't want to lose the train of thought. So one thing that a lot of people talk about, and what we discussed earlier, was how Boba Fett originally went out in the last movie. And just was a chump, just went out in the Sarlacc pit, whatever. And I had seen something somewhere, and I can't remember if it was in a video or if I read it somewhere, but it was about using this opportunity, bringing Boba Fett into The Mandalorian to redeem that death and give Boba Fett a proper death. Do you think that that's something that we would see? Do you think that we would see Boba Fett die in either this season or in The Mandalorian at all?
I do think that happens this season. Because there's multiple things in this episode that kind of harken back to Boba trying to honor his father and bring honor to his name. And that's something that Jango was trying to do in the prequels. He may not have done it the right way, but he was trying to bring honor to his name and give something for his son. And we even saw in the Clone Wars that Boba, even in the opportunities of like for example, Aura Singh trying to talk him into essentially killing people, he always was very conflicted. He was always a very conflicted kid in that series. And, we have to keep out the original trilogy stuff too, because it was so new and so just first in this situation. I'm in the thought process of thinking that whenever we see, because we now know that the team going forward is going to be Fennec Shand, Boba, and Mando, possibly Grief Karga and Cara Dune as well, but definitely those three. I tend to think that at some point, Boba is going to sacrifice himself the hero way and bring honor to his name and to his father. And that also leads to Cobb Vanth getting the armor back. But I do think that Boba will probably die at the end of the season. He'll get the honorable death, the hero's death. Because at this point, you can do two things, right? As great as Boba is, as big of a badass Boba is, there's only so much more story you can tell with him. He's getting older. He may not be as limb as he once were, even though he was great in this episode. Up against other bounty hunters, he's probably not that limber. Right. And his weapons can only get him so far. I tend to think that he'll probably either die or he'll maybe retire. I know a lot of people are saying he might retire. As a Boba Fett fan, I don't see Boba retiring. Yeah. It doesn't feel like it's in his blood to retire and give up the armor.
Yeah.
And so I see him kind of, doing the hero's death, dying, sacrificing himself for Din, for the Mandalorian way, and saving Grogu, and then that armor being passed down to Cobb Vanth, and that's how Cobb Vanth comes back into the picture.
Yeah, you just made a Boba Fett sound like Barristan Sell Me to me, and so I am here for Boba Barristan stands, ships, all of that. I am absolutely here for that. So I don't have a picture of Fennec. So we see Boba Fett with Fennec Shand. Is that am I saying that right, or am I wrong?
Fennec Shand. Yep, Fennec Shand.
Okay. Super cool. Now let's go back to the previously on stuff. Did that spoil this moment for you? Do you care about stuff like that in the previously on? Because very clearly it's going to show you what you're going to see in this episode.
For me, not so much. I don't really care. I definitely feel like Mandalorian, out of most episodes, they've used the previously on more so than ever. I think that, they're definitely teasing what's coming, and they're more relevant to what's actually going to be shown than ever. To me, it was, when I looked at it, I was like, oh, we're going to find out who that figure is. Not so much towards Fennec. And so when she showed up, I was like, oh, dude, that's awesome. Like, that's so cool. I knew that she was alive personally. I felt like you can't cast Ming-Na Wen and not use her. And she's just incredible. And so using her in a half an episode never made sense. So I felt like we were going to see her at some point, and I'm really happy it was this episode.
Me too. She's a badass in this episode.
Yeah, and as Level 2 says, the cavalry is back. That's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. She's called the cavalry in that show. It's so good. She's great. I love that she's also involved in the show, and that we're going to see more of her too. That's not just a one-off. We're going to see more of her.
That's what I feel. That's where I do feel like the story will ultimately go. I'm hoping with a lot of this backstage drama that's been going on with some of the actors inside of the series, that it'll just end up being Fennec taking place over Cara Dune, and just letting that be the core group of people. Let Cara Dune do her martial shit or whatever cop shit that she's got to do on that planet. Handle up over there. Let's keep the Mando with Fennec Shand. I want to see them together all the time.
Agreed.
One of the things that was... I'm sorry, I'll let you go.
No, I was going to highlight Chris's comment real quick. Chris Adams about Boba's age. So, Chris, keep this in mind. There was a non-official released episode of Clone Wars about him going up against his mentor in Clone Wars, where he gets the dent in the helmet and stuff like that. He's around like 16, 18 in that time frame. And then you fast forward 25, 30 years. He would probably be in a 45, maybe 50 range, depending on how. And again, keep in mind, we talked about this already. Star Wars doesn't really care about keeping in line with the small details. If they have to up an age, they can up an age. Look at Katie Sackhoff as Bo-Katan.
Yeah,
she's probably too young looking to play that character right now. But hey, we don't care. We really don't care because it works. So I don't know. I don't see Boba fitting in the show in the long run. But for a couple episodes, I'm 1,000% down.
So what else makes me super interested about that scene is Fennec talks about how Boba saved her and the way that he saved her.
So cool.
Like with that little, like it definitely gave me Darth Vader vibes, but I don't know that side. Like, is Boba Fett actually a genius?
It's awesome. And that's the big question a lot of people are having. I've had a lot of conversations about this of if he worked on her or if he took her somewhere. Because we also have to keep in mind too, Boba got out of the Sarlacc pit. Is he possibly worked on as well? Like, did he lose a limb or two in that situation as well? Could he have some work somewhere, and did he do it to himself? Or is he just really handy with some machinery, and he did to Fennec as well? If the story does kind of get fleshed out, I expect to get that answered. But for now, I think that it's an okay reason to be like, yeah, I got some new parts in me. I'm alive and all well now, so let's move on.
Do you think that maybe because there's not a lot of information about Tusken Raiders out there, right?
There's not a ton. They've done more in this series than they ever have.
Do you think maybe they're a little bit more advanced than most of us think?
It could be very possible. And if the idea that Boba was actually living among them comes into play, because he has the gaffy stick, he has the rifle of the Tusken Raiders. So he was obviously involved in them, whether it was him attacking them and taking it. I'm more in the mind that he was actually among them for a long time and we've seen it. They're actually really good people. Like, they're really a really good race of people. Especially when you get into the right, section of them, not the ones that, kill people and the Phantom Menace and stuff like that. Yeah. So it would be an interesting question, because it would also keep in line with our history that some civilizations were also a little bit more tech savvy than we were.
Yep, that is very true. So the weapon that he used, say that name again. Is it Gaffy?
The gaffy stick. Yeah, gaffy stick.
Gaffy stick. That, what Boba Fett did with that blew my brain. Oh my goodness.
So badass.
Like, he
badass.
Shop with that. That was so nuts. And it was literally not until the last time that I watched the episode to get ready for tonight that I noticed Boba Fett take that look into the Razor Crest, and then it hit me. I was like, now I know what he's doing there. I see what he's doing there.
Yeah, and it's cool because you get that really cool scene of him absolutely destroying stormtroopers with the gaffy stick. Just absolutely destroying them. Yes. And then you look inside the Razor Crest and it does a zoom in shot and you can see it sitting there. And it's just like, and you think to yourself, oh my God, he's getting the armor back. Like, oh my God, he's getting the armor back. And then the following scene happens and you're just like losing your mind.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Let me see. I know I don't have the picture that I wanted for it, but I will put this one up here really quickly.
Oh, look at that.
Look at that.
So good.
I love this. I genuinely do. Like, I know a lot of people are giving a lot of weird stuff about how the suit isn't fitting right on Cobb and now on Boba Fett, but I absolutely adore that image so much.
So good.
It's just like it felt so nice, and this is why I love Star Wars. Like, I don't know every single history about Boba Fett. Like, I don't know legends. I don't know anything like that. But when Boba Fett put on that armor and started wrecking shop the way that he did, I was screaming. Like, I felt like I was jumping up and down, screaming in my house. Like, I do the same thing. I watch it whenever it drops, but I'm in Central Time, so it drops at 2 a.m. where I'm at.
Gotcha.
My house knows that I live with my family right now, and my house knows on Thursday nights, because it's Thursday going into Friday, on Thursday nights, I'm staying up late and I'm watching it. I try to be as quiet as I can whenever I see cool shit go on screen, but I screamed whenever all of that stuff happened, and watching Boba do what he does in that armor was amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible because they also did a really cool thing with the look of him. We know that he just has the top and some knee guards. You got the kneecap stuff on his legs. But they gave him a little sense of Temuera Morrison's heritage. Temuera Morrison is, and I hope I'm saying this right, he's Morai.
I think.
I think he's Morai, and so they gave him this really classic skirt look with some hanging threads down that very much played to his heritage. The cool thing about this, though, is that with the gaffy stick, the tip of the gaffy stick, that like circular spear that kind of has like those ridges on it, it's actually that is actually the tip of an ancient Morai weapon.
Wow.
You can look this up online. There's pictures of the ancient race of Morai, and it's a much shorter version. It's probably about half the size, but the tip of it is exactly the tip of that spear. So they played into Temuera Morrison's heritage in the show with not just the weapon, but also the way he looked. I love the kind of skirt look that he has going on with the threads hanging down. It's really, really cool. It's different from the Boba we know, but we also have to remember this is a very different Boba that we remember. He's a much more central moral character. He has a code to live by now. The Boba that we know from years ago, he was kind of like a murder bot in a way. He was a bounty hunter who was out for the money. He did what he needed to. He would kill whoever he wanted to. I just read a comic book earlier where he shot someone in the back. Like this Boba wouldn't do that. That Boba does. And so it's all going to be different. The way he looks, the way he feels, also to the whole, the weight thing. Luke was badass. Han Solo was badass. Princess Leia was badass. Boba Fett is badass. So that has nothing to do with it. Like, who cares about the whole weight thing? Does not matter.
No, give me Temuera Morrison all day long. I love that also. So for anyone that doesn't know who Temuera Morrison is, I'm pretty sure people who are in the chat now do know, but if you're watching this on the playback, like, comment, subscribe on this, help out your girl, all of that good stuff. If you are here joining for the Padawan Chronicles and you're a Padawan just like me, if you don't know who Temuera Morrison is, he does the acting in the prequels. He plays Jango Fett in the prequels, and then he also does the voice for all of the clone troopers inside of Clone Wars, right?
He does some of them. He doesn't do all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he's very much involved in it. So I loved that they brought him back into this role. That's another question that I have for you. I've seen bigger. So we know Temuera Morrison, I wouldn't say like he's this huge actor, stuff like that, where we've seen other people that have a little bit more popularity, like Bill Burr come in. All of the names that I can't think of right now. Giancarlo Esposito. I was going to say Giancarlo Stanton.
Carl Weathers. I mean, there's a lot of them.
Yes. So having all of these big people inside of Star Wars, does that take anything away for you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think Temuera Morrison is in that like middle ground where for most you recognize him, but you don't know his name. Yeah. And he's a big enough actor to be like, oh, I know that guy. I've seen him before, but I don't know his name. I know a lot of people in the chat are saying he's Aquaman's dad. He plays a great Aquaman's dad. But also something that a lot of people may not know too. He's incredible in the Star show Spartacus. He plays the gladiator trainer in that show, and he is effing phenomenal. So he's a really good actor, but he's in that like middle ground where you recognize the face, but you don't know the name. And that could very well play into the category of someone like Pedro Pascal as well. For a lot of people, they see the face, they're like, oh, I saw that guy in Game of Thrones, but I don't know his name. I saw him in Kingsman, but I don't know his name.
Right.
So it never takes away. I don't care about, I know a lot of the times I'm like, okay, I'd rather see an unknown person. And I know that's what Star Wars does. Star Wars completely does the unknown thing. But when it comes to something like this, where it's been clearly put into place that we know big names are going to appear in this show one way or another, whether it's a cameo or in a big role, I'm totally okay with it. I don't care. And Temuera is kind of this like role that, or this actor that he's not big enough to be like, I see that actor. I don't see that character. You see the character instead of the actor in that situation. Plus, it's just really cool for the guy who played Jango to come back and play Boba. So.
Yes. I love those ties. And that's why I was super fine with Katie Sackhoff coming and playing Bo-Katan, because I'm a huge, big nostalgia nerd. Like, pump nostalgia into my veins, please. I love it. I live it. I breathe it. So anything that has just Easter eggs and everything like that, like little hints that just show some love to fan service is my shit. I know a lot of people hate it, but I am the person that absolutely adores fan service.
Mandalorian is doing fan service the right way.
Yeah.
A lot of the times you see some shows like take the Arrowverse, for example. I was an avid watcher of the Arrowverse on television with Arrow and Flash and all that stuff. They don't do fan service the best way. It's very cheesy, it's very straightforward, and it takes away from everything going on. This it all makes sense for what everything has a purpose in this show. And whether it's whether they say something in this episode and it comes back the next week, or if it's in the first season and comes back the next season, which perfect example, right? Chapter 5 of last year on Tatooine, the gunslinger, it looked like a total just fake out episode, a total filler. A year later, it is one of the most important episodes to ever happen in this series because of Boba and because of Fennec Shand. So like everything has a purpose in this series.
Absolutely, 100%. I love that. So those big people don't take away anything from me.
And by the way, Weston, I'm not trashing the Arrowverse. I watch all of them and do happily. They just don't do fan service the best way.
I don't watch any of the Marvel shows. That's Marvel.
That's DC. That's DC.
See, it's not my forte, y'all. I'm super sorry about that. I'm not ready to dive into that world yet. Let me finish Star Wars, and then maybe I'll talk about DC and Marvel at some point. Let me get into Star Wars a little bit more. In my notes, I'm just looking at my notes. Ming-Na Wen is amazing. This is the first time that we've seen Fennec Shand, right? Like she's not in anything else outside of the Mandalorian.
Created for Mando. She was in Chapter 5 of last year, and she was in this episode. Yes.
Nice. I love it. One of my favorite quotes in this episode is when Ming-Na Wen is when Fennec Shand comes in and after like Mando figures out that it's her, she comes back down. It's like, you look like you've seen a ghost.
Yep. And again, Ming-Na Wen, she plays it so perfectly. She's an actress that we haven't seen a lot of prior to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. She popped up. She obviously is the famous voice of Mulan, the animated movie. She did Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a long time. She kicked ass on there. And now she's finally getting that chance to really show what she's capable of and a wide range because everyone watches this show. Not everyone watches Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so now people are realizing, oh, like this girl is awesome. And I didn't realize she's like 57 years old and she's like kicking straight ass, which is amazing.
She's a BAMF. That is absolutely for sure. In my notes, I have Chekhov's jetpack.
Yeah.
I want to get into that for a quick second because this is my theory on it. And it's Mando is a baby daddy, right? So he sees his baby getting taken away, completely disregards it. I know a lot of people are talking about how he left the planet without the jetpack. The only thing that I can think of is that what happened, right?
Well, we never actually saw him. I'd actually have to go back and watch because if he was on Navarro without the jetpack, that would be very interesting.
Yeah.
And someone in the chat, if you guys know,
yes, chat,
because there's a shot of his back on Navarro when he's talking to Cara Dune, and I didn't even recognize that the jetpack was gone. That's very interesting.
So if he did leave the jetpack on Tython, my theory is that he realizes that he left it there. It's made of Beskar, right?
Oh yeah.
Got to go back and get it, and then when we get there, that's when we're going to see whatever Jedi that was being called out to the Force, and that's when we find out who it is.
It's really good.
So that's my theory on the jetpack. It's Chekhov's jetpack. It's going to have to come back up at some point. So that'd be really good like that.
It's interesting. And I know someone in the chat says he doesn't always wear it, but whenever he steps off the ship, he has the jetpack on. From what I understand, from what I can see anyway. But I'm more so when they take Baby Yoda at the end and he doesn't have the jetpack on, obviously it was like a setup to like him taking the jetpack off, him not having the jetpack at the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
That was my only thing with this episode is that they didn't come back to that at all. Like him even attempting to try the jetpack would have been like a nice callback to him not having it on.
Yeah.
It did just feel like he didn't even like attempt. And maybe he's just thinking to himself, oh, I don't have my jetpack on. Yeah. But for us audience members, it's different because we need to see that stuff. Mm-hmm. That was the only thing in this episode I questioned because there was no real like callback to it after he took it off.
Yeah, I agree. Running up there as fast as you can and completely forgetting a very valuable part of your armor, and not showing it in a television show, it does leave space for a lot of people to start having these conversations. Like, what are you doing, Din? Absolutely. What are you doing?
Absolutely.
The deal. So the deal between Boba Fett and Din Djarin is the safety of the child in return for the suit. So what is my question for this? They talk about how there's a high bounty on it, on the child now. He can buy 10 Beskar armors with the sending in the child and stuff like that. So Boba telling Din that he's going to stick with them until the child is safe. That deal happens before Grogu gets taken away, right? That's
that's after. That takes place after. Okay. That's towards the end of the episode. Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm completely off on my weirdness. So
it's all good. There really is, honestly, when I was like screen grabbing images for the show that I do, it all muddles together at that point because Boba's in the armor and you're like, okay, where does this take place? Where does this take place? And so it's all kind of like a nice little mix.
Yeah. So then after they start talking about the armor, stormtroopers show up. So now the stormtroopers are coming in, and one really fun, interesting fact that I learned but never really got into was that there are different types of armor for stormtroopers. And I was so pumped to see the orange shoulder pad.
A lot of people were, yeah.
And then the yellow outlining and shoulder pad on that as well. That I was super pumped to see that. I love to see teeny tiny, because I don't know anything about it. Were you excited? And do you know any of the ranks and what they are?
So I haven't done research on the ranks, but I actually learned this from one Dwayne Burke, and he had been talking about it because he obviously comes from a military background, and he was raving at the fact that this was like a very militarized episode when it came to the stormtroopers.
Right.
They had like a set goal on what they were doing, formation, how things were talking about, and when it comes from someone with a military background, I'm like, okay, wow, that's incredible. Like they did the research on how things were supposed to be. And so it's really, really cool. Yeah. And it's a super cool callback. They're not just the basic stormtroopers. And it plays because typically when we see the stormtrooper with the orange shoulder pad, they're not really doing anything. They just feel like another stormtrooper. This guy was barking out orders.
Right.
Like this guy was actually barking out orders like an actual leader would. And so it felt very kind of Army-esque, which was really cool because it's a callback to, our world, obviously. Yeah, it was just, I thought the stormtroopers were really good.
Yeah.
They were shooting well. They obviously got their butts kicked, but they were also doing what they were supposed to. There were a ton of them. And it was also really funny when Boba shot his kneecap gun, they all ran away and they're like, oh yeah, we're not messing with this guy. We're not messing with this guy. And they all retreated at that point. But yeah, I thought it was a really good scene. Typically, sometimes stormtroopers can be really cheesy and just like a plot point to get out of the way. But they actually felt like they were doing something this time. And that's completely to Robert Rodriguez and what he's able to do as a director.
Yeah.
The guy does this stuff so well. So total kudos to him.
Absolutely. I agree with the whole thing about the stormtroopers. I just remember them not really being the joke. The joke is that they can't
exactly.
shoot. That's a common thing. Like I feel like most people who know even the tiniest bit about Star Wars can understand that joke, especially if you're a fan of the original trilogy, because they're just goofballs in those three movies, in my opinion. So it was really great to see that. I would love to have a conversation with Dwayne about Stormtroopers sometime, because I know that Dwayne really is into Star Wars as well.
He was totally just talking about the formations and how everything was happening and getting it from his perspective. Gave me a complete new perspective. It was really cool to listen to him talk about it.
Nice. I love that. So whenever they are fighting the stormtroopers, one fun shot that I saw was when Din and Fennec were fighting off stormtroopers together, and Fennec stands behind Din and starts to shoot and to use it as a shield. Yep. I thought that was hilarious, and I thought that was great. Genius is what I have written down here. Yes, and then after, so we did jump around a little bit, but during that whole fight scene, we do get to see Big Daddy Boba, and then oh man,
I cannot tell you how incredible this is. Like, just he looks like Boba Fett. It's insane.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so good.
That the way that he's standing, like the angle of his stance, the pointing of his gun, like that shot is so good.
It feels, it's a very, very Mandalorian thing, the way they shoot that, because Din does the same thing. When he shoots, he does that kind of same, very similar stance. But seeing it on Boba Fett is like a total game changer.
Yes. And then we also have this fun shot that was right
so
here.
good. So good.
I love it. The great line, the super great line. I was aiming for the other one.
Yep. Love it. So amazing. So good. It's a total Boba Fett thing to not be satisfied with killing 2 transports.
I thought that was great, and I enjoy that type of humor in Star Wars. One thing that always kind of whenever I see people talk about Star Wars, just I feel like I've heard for a very long time that Star Wars was initially made for children, and a part of that is still in there. So a lot of stuff is kind of geared and focused towards viewers for enjoyment from all viewers, so kids can enjoy it, parents can enjoy it, and stuff like that. So that's why I love Dank Farrik. I think that's hilarious. I think it's hilarious that we've gone through this entire series without a single curse word. It's so great. Right? Yeah. It's so great. It's funny to think about, because I cuss like a sailor all the time, and so whenever noticing that it's not there, and the lack of noticing that it's not there, is what makes it feel so much better for me. So big shout out to that. I love the Dank Farriks. I do. I love those little quippy lines. Those fun Star Wars lines are always good for me.
Well, and it works because they don't take away from what's happening. And you know, I know a lot of people might flack me for this, but that's what I despise about The Last Jedi. A lot of those comedy bits are very cheesy and out of place. They feel very forced. And The Rise of Skywalker did it as well. You know, The Force Awakens did it best out of the sequel trilogy. But you know, when we think of the original trilogy, there's great lines, but they're in the context of what's happening, and they're not just forced lines. Like you believe that characters would say those things. And in this moment, you believe that Boba would say something like that.
Yeah. There's a little thing that Boba does when the stormtroopers are going back into the ship. He does this gunslinger move where he takes his little rifle, whips around, and puts it back. I loved that. I absolutely love that.
I saw actually I saw it today on either Twitter and Instagram, but someone could combine the GIF of Django doing it and Boba doing it next to each other. It's so good. So good.
I like that. I like that a lot. The next note that I have is R.I.P. Razor Crest.
Yeah, well, so let's talk about this, because this is a big deal. This is a very, very big deal. So at this point, we had thought that the Razor Crest was going to be turned into a Millennium Falcon or a Slave One or a Luke X-Wing or anything of that nature, like a very popular ship in Star Wars, or a Ghost, even a Ghost, something like that. When they blew up the Razor Crest, completely destroyed it, it's gone. It's not being rebuilt. There's no absolute chance. There is no absolute chance this thing is being rebuilt. Maybe a new one, but we had learned very early on that there's very few of them still left because it's an older model.
That's right. They do say that in the first season about how
it's a very old model. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
And so there's two things with this. One, it shows that this show is not afraid to do things, which I love. It's not afraid to take chances on things that people love. Because the Razor Crest has been everywhere. It's been on Hot Toys and Legos and 3D models and all that type of stuff. Two, I think that moment was strictly laying the groundwork for Din to get the Slave One. Yeah. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think the Slave One will eventually become Din's ship. Din's going to need a ship. Whenever the whole thing with Boba is done, Din is going to need a ship. And so it would make sense that the ship that was just brought back to life becomes Din. And that plays into my theory that Boba will I believe that he'll die. Some people believe he'll retire. If that does happen, Slave One has to go to someone. And being that Boba is about to go on this journey with Din, that they're about to have this thing together and they're about to really experience the Mandalorian way together. I think there's going to be a certain amount of respect between the two of them, that they're really going to grow with one another, because Boba has never had that with another Mandalorian. He's never had that. If he can have that with Din, it could mean a lot of things for the characters, and that not just Boba's armor gets passed on, but Boba's ship gets passed on, and Din takes on the ship because he doesn't need transport at this point. And it would also mean a great deal that the ship would be passed down from another Mandalorian to another Mandalorian. So
right. That's been my favorite thing about the second season. I think the first season did it also, but I do feel like the first season laid a lot of groundwork. What I feel like the second season is doing is allowing this property to really explore Mandalorian culture without shoving it down our throats. That what we're learning about is Mandalorian culture. So when with Bo-Katan coming back in the last few episodes, and with Boba Fett being someone that's a part of this series, even though he's not technically Mandalorian, there's that whole issue with stuff. I can't speak on any of that. So, but
yeah,
I love that.
Well, what I was going to say is that this show has strictly been about what it means to be a Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Like over time, we have learned that this show has gotten from, this little green ball of thing to what it really means to be a Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And it's more so even in this season more than ever, right? He met Bo-Katan. He had realized that what he grew up with technically isn't the true Mandalorian way. That'll 1000% come back. And I know I'm jumping way too far ahead of myself, but the armor from season 1 is going to come back. And I'll say this now and I'll just get it out of the way. She will be the big bad of the series. She will be the big bad of the series after Moff Gideon is gone. It'll be Mando versus Mando stuff. And it's going to come down to Din realizing that what he came up on isn't the right way, that the Bo-Katan way is the right way, that the Boba Fett way is the right way, and that what he essentially, all of his friends and family and the clan that he was with is not the true way. But that's down the road. That's down the road. She'll come back. That clan will come back, and it'll be very exciting. But yeah, it's interesting because from what we've seen from Boba Fett in the past, he never really had a code. He never really had this code to live by. And this could end up playing back into the eventual Boba Fett miniseries if we do see it. But what happened to him that made him have morals, that made him have this code to live by, where he says, your end of the bargain is done, mine's not. I'm helping you. The old Boba Fett wouldn't do that. Like that's not what the old Boba Fett would do. And so I'm very intrigued on what changed him. Was it someone? Was it something? Was it his event with the Sarlacc pit? I don't know. But it's very interesting because now we know officially that he is essentially Team Mando. And he is Clan Mudhorn, essentially, going forward, which is awesome. But how long that will be, I don't know. But it is very cool that there's this set of respect between the two of them that we're going to see going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I am also, I know that some people are still talking about it in the chat, whether or not Boba Fett will die. I am also on team Boba Fett dies this season. As much as I love the character.
A hero's death.
A hero's death. That is right. And I'm totally fine with, like most people who know me know, I love Game of Thrones. So if you take a very important character away earlier than what most people think that they should be, I'm fine with it. I'm already used to it. I watched Ned Stark die. It's fine.
To level 2 Trading's comment right there about the armorer, I'll do you one better. She's not just associated with Maul. She is actually the character known as Rook Cast.
Ooh.
She is, I will say it now. She is the character known as Rook Cast from Clone Wars, who was Gar Saxon's second in command. Just look into that. That'll be that could be a really callback.
I want you to save that because we're going to talk about homework.
Yeah, I'll save that.
Yes, we'll talk about homework. I do want to give a big shout out to Mr. Mark Riley in the chat. That's not Mike Riley, that's Chris Adams.
Hey,
shout out to
Riley.
Mr. Mark Riley. Hi. Yeah, Mark is another big inspiration.
I'm with you, Mark. I'm with you. I mean, look. Give me Boba.
Yes, give me that Boba Fett series 100%. So what I did think was funny, I do have this picture. Razor Crest is gone. Oh my gosh, that ship is totally annihilated. But you know what we did see, what we did find out of that whole thing?
So good.
Was the little gear.
So good. And so the fact that still survived makes me believe that's Beskar.
That was my question. How could that survive when everything else was destroyed?
One, it could just be so small to where it didn't get damaged, because it is very small. But there are a lot of small things on the ship that could have got damaged. 2, it could just be like a thing where They wanted to save it because of the sentimental value that's had over the last couple episodes specifically.
Right.
But 3, and I'm more inclined to believe this, but that it is made of Beskar, because we saw the staff was also saved, which is obviously pure Beskar as well. I don't know if the ball will come back into play being like, oh my God, it's made of Beskar, let's make it a huge thing. But I think that it'll be revealed that it's made of Beskar, and then it comes back into play because of his connection with Grogu. I think that's the only reason why. I don't think it'll be like a super weapon or something in the future, but I mean, who knows?
It's going to be one of those situations where like someone puts the Bible, like a thick book or a Bible in their pocket.
And that is very possible. Yeah, that's true.
And then
that's
we see a bing with a lightsaber and it gets deflected off of the little ball. Have you seen that fan art of an older Grogu?
I just saw it today.
Catcher?
Yeah, I just saw it today. Yeah.
I think that is such a beautiful thing. And he's got the little
It is very possible that we see that happen.
I love that idea. I think that's a wonderful thing, especially because
it's inevitable that Grogu outlives Din. Mm-hmm. It's inevitable. Like that's what's going to happen. What if the series ends with a flash forward of Grogu like 700 years in the future? I mean, that would be crazy.
I would love that. I would absolutely adore that. So now we're going to get into something that I know absolutely nothing about, absolutely no clue, had no idea what this was ever until a couple of episodes before, and that's the Dark Troopers. OMGs. Watching these suckers come out of the sky the way that they did was intense. Now, like I said, I know nothing about Dark Troopers. So, Jake, if you can give me just a good gist of who they are, what they are, anything like that.
They have a long history in Legends. They're very popular. They actually have like an evolution almost, and through each story, they kind of like evolved in a way. There's multiple iterations. There's the droid iteration, which seems to be what we're getting here. There's also the iteration of them being clones, but them being cybernetic clones and having attachments. So like extra limbs, or maybe they were just like kind of blown up, like almost like a cyborg from the DC universe, versions of Star Wars cyborg, essentially.
Nice.
And they have a lot of abilities, very powerful. One of the versions did definitely have Force abilities. They were implanted with the Force, which was a Legends thing. Still, to be determined on whether or not that happens here. But the main thing to talk about here is that whether or not they're actually made from Beskar.
Ooh,
that is very possible that they could be made from Beskar. And if that is the case, that would make them the most dangerous thing that anybody has ever come up against, because if they are made from the Beskar and we have to keep this in mind as well. So when Din got his Beskar in season 1, he got it from the client who was working for Gideon. Mm-hmm. That means that Gideon had all the Beskar. And that means Gideon has pure Beskar, which is more than Beskar. It's a little bit better than Beskar. We learned that in the Ahsoka episode because Ahsoka had talked about, and we saw her fight Din, and his Beskar, there were no scratches on his armor from her lightsabers. If that is the case, that means that the Dark Troopers could be made from this material, and they will essentially be unbeatable. Because like Din blocking off blaster bullets and stuff like that, they could be doing the same exact thing. And being that Din got his Beskar from the client, who got it from Moff Gideon, it would make sense that Moff Gideon would create and use all that Mandalorian Beskar to create these Dark Troopers, and the fact that there only seemed to be a number of them. There didn't seem to be an army. There seemed to be like 20, 30 tops maybe, which means there's a limited supply. And so we'll find out eventually, but I think it would be very cool because it would be a kind of like a plot point or just a thing for Din and Boba and maybe Bo-Katan if she comes back to be like, well, we need to destroy them, but we also need to save them because that's our Beskar.
Yeah.
To rebuild their culture and everything. So it would be a very interesting thing, but I'm interested to see if they have Force abilities. I don't think they do, like Legends do. I think that might be left up for Moff Gideon and his abilities. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be interesting. I think that they're going to be probably one of the most badass things I've seen in a long time in Star Wars, as far as droids go.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are complaining, like, well, they showed up, but they didn't do anything. Guys, we have 2 episodes left. This was essentially the first of a 3-part finale, I have a feeling, and they're going to completely show up and wreak absolutely havoc over the next 2 episodes.
My headcanon is that Mr. Bones shows up and just destroys everything. I don't know how, but if anyone's familiar with any of the books, Mr. Bones is in the Aftermath series.
Yeah.
I want him in my life for sure.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I do want to give some shout outs to these very wonderful people. I totally forgot that I had a Streamlabs. My bad. Hello. You can donate, help your girl out at DannyJoy.live. That's Danny with 1 E in it. But big shout out to Steve, my boy Steve, Movie Fanobi. Danny, glad to see you chat about something else you're passionate enough. Please don't be so hard on yourself. Mando has had a great second season, and I wasn't much interested in Boba. Solid episode. I'm excited for the next 2 and beyond. All the best, Steve. Steve, that's interesting. I not being interested in Boba. That's what I'm always confused about with the. Not confused, but like Jake and I had said earlier, I love Boba Fett. Grew up with Boba Fett as a character. Always thought he was a badass because I was a little kid when I saw him. Always thought he was a badass. So I'm always interested in hearing the people's opinions that don't care for Boba Fett.
I understand where some of them are coming from, because a lot of people may not read the stories that happen in Legends, and so they just have the movies to go off of. And if I'm looking at just the movies, I mean, yeah, he's a kind of a big wimp and a sucker in those movies. So I get it.
Yep. Shout out to Ferris in the Streamlabs. $5. Hello. Thank you, Ferris. And my big love, my sweet love, Mr. Jake Yakavetta hanging out with us just did let's go. Jake knows that I've been very excited about being able to talk Star Wars with people. So I'm very glad. So, and that's Jake Yakavetta, not Jake Berlin. Sorry. I forgot about that. Oh, how funny. Yay. So also after, so before we get into to Spice, because I definitely want to talk to you about Spice, I do have a question. Do we know, or do you know, or does anyone know if Moff Gideon is Force sensitive?
Not at this point. I had raised a question to a couple people over the weekend on whether or not they thought that moment with him and Grogu was implying that he was Force sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
There is still a slight part of me that believes he is actually a little Force sensitive. But if we keep in mind, what is it, Chapter 12, Episode 4 of this season, the Siege, where they go and find those bodies in the tube, it would seem like their experiments don't work yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if it does come back and reveal that he does have some kind of ability. But I'm more of a high percentage believe that he's just really incredible with the Darksaber. Because we saw that with the Magistrate as well in the Ahsoka episode. She was really good with her spear. Mm-hmm. And she fought off someone like Ahsoka, so it can happen.
Yep.
And again,
in the chat, I think he's trying to gain Force sensitivity through.
I agree. But the big question is whether or not he already has. I think that's the big question. I don't know if it'll be revealed. But I'm more inclined to believe that he doesn't have it yet, but he's still trying to get there. Nice.
I love that. So yeah, let's talk about Spice, because Spice was something.
Ferris just woke up in from a deep sleep. I see you, Ferris.
Yeah, he's ready. He was ready to talk about Spice. Getting back into the movies as an adult, rewatching the movies, I didn't recognize Spice as anything. I can't remember where Spice was really, maybe it was in the prequels or anything like that. But immediately before I knew that it was an actual reference to Dune, I was like, that's from Dune. So I love Spice and Ferris. So I'm going to tell you what I think is the theory that I've been hearing around. And then Jake, you can fill me in on anything that you think. And then Ferris, you can tell me. So the idea of it is that Boba Fett was a drug addict when he was a bounty hunter. And that was why he was pretty petty and fucked up in the way that he did things. I think I saw something somewhere where people said that's probably why he got thrown into the Sarlacc pit so easily, because he was probably high as fuck. Yep. So he gets into Slave One, follows the Dark Troopers, and they're back. And that line and the sound of his voice inside of that line is so
fear.
Scared. Yeah, like that's solid fear right there. So I'm wondering also, because from what I can remember, wasn't he working with Darth Vader? Like, wasn't he working with the Empire at some point? Is that why he knows like how dangerous they are? Because he sounded very scared.
Yeah, it's interesting because he was obviously a gun for hire when he was a little younger. I mean, Empire Strikes Back was probably around, I'll probably say like 8 to 10 years from this moment. And so 8 to 10 years ago, he was a gun for hire and he was being hired by Vader and the Empire. At that point, I'm sure he didn't show up, but I'm sure he was a little fearful from what the Empire was doing. And again, we don't know what's happened in this 5 years time that we haven't seen him. Because it goes back to the idea that he has kind of like a moral code to live by now. This almost seems like an idea of that. And I do like the idea that he could have been on spice this entire time, because we know that spice is the main drug in the galaxy. It's in Clone Wars a lot. I don't know if it's in Rebels. I believe it's mainly in Clone Wars. That's probably popped up a bit in the prequels. But it's the drug in Star Wars. And so part of me wants to believe that it was just kind of like a funny little line that over the last 5 years, he's kind of been like partying and living the retired life. But I wouldn't be surprised if it does come back. But again, it almost feels like this kind of small thing to where it can go either way. It can either go, I mean, it's very true. We saw Boba a lot in the Clone Wars. The Spice was involved a lot in the Clone Wars. It is very possible that's the case. But it's kind of that like one of those lines where it can go either way. If it's not mentioned, it's not a big deal. If it is mentioned, they just better do it right. So yeah. I'm intrigued if it is mentioned, but I don't think it will be mentioned, because I think there's so much other stuff going on that it might not be. Yeah, Jeremy. Yeah, I mean, if you're the one that's tried it here in the real world, I mean, good at you, man. But yeah, I think I don't see it coming back, because I feel like there's so much other important stuff that is in play here that it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, and it could just be a good link to the rest of the world, like you said, as a throwaway line. This isn't a spice dream. Maybe he's done spice before, but wasn't an addict on spice. Yeah. I think what Ferris was getting at was maybe it was he started doing. This is what I'm assuming. Ferris, correct me if I'm wrong, but he saw. I know what happens. Saw his dad, and then just completely traumatized, and then got into drugs. Is that kind of the theory that you're
probably? Yeah, probably. I would say that, and he was very young when that happened, so maybe it happens like as soon as we don't see him from the Clone Wars show, because he kind of becomes a teenager then. He's a little older. He's around that 16, 18 age, and that's kind of typically where it happens. Maybe there's this lull in life where the Empire starts to rise. The world the galaxy is completely changing as we know it. He doesn't really know his place at this point, and he starts doing the spice, which is very possible. So, but again, the only place I would see it coming back is the Boba Fett miniseries. But until then, I wouldn't look too much into it.
I would like that. I would like that to be the end of Spice in the Mandalorian and do exactly what you just said. Let Spice be a thing in the Boba Fett series.
Yeah.
So one thing that we did gloss over was the chain code in Boba Fett's armor. That was so sweet to me. I have no idea how that works. I don't know what that is. So I just thought that was really nice.
Yeah, so it's almost like a God, what's the best way I can put it? It's you can kind of call it like a Star Wars tattoo, where it's like their history implanted on the armor. And it's a version of a virtual tattoo in a way. And the actual decoding of it is pretty complicated. It's not
Mandalore that's in it, and is this only with Mandalorian armor?
Yeah, it's their verbiage and their language. And there's actually people have decoded it all over the internet and stuff like that. And I have a version of it here, but it's not in proper grammar. It's kind of complicated, but it relies heavy on legend stuff, which is really cool from a Star Wars fan perspective, because that means that Favreau and Filoni are paying attention to what first happened to Jango Fett in the entire history of Star Wars. Because when we go through this, and this is where legends and canon gets really wild, and Jango Fett is one of those rare cases where it just gets insane. His history was established in legends at one point, right? Jango Fett, he was a foundling. He was found by this character called Jaster, who became like a father figure to him. And then they fought in the Mandalorian Civil War, which was mentioned in this episode, so that's confirmed. But then in the prequels, that was all essentially just erased. That was gone. And then over the next 10 years, and again, in more novels and stuff like that, and through, Dave Filoni in Clone Wars and George Lucas in Clone Wars, that was doubled on and erased even again. And be like, no, that's not the case. So it's flipped back and forth like 3 or 4 times on their history. But essentially what the coded message says is that Concord Dawn, which is mentioned in the message, is the home planet of Jango Fett, which was from Legends. That was confirmed in Legends. It's a planet in the Mandalore system. It was eventually destroyed, very similar to the planet of Krypton that was destroyed. That wasn't Krypton. The other one that was destroyed, that was a big part of that story in the Superman stuff. And so he was a foundling, and Father Fett, that's in the code, refers to Jango, and is likely a reference to Jango. And the mentor Jaster is mentioned in there as well. It says Mentor Jaster, which is a callback to Legend's storyline. Being that Jaster was a father figure to Jango and was essentially the father to foundling Jango, meaning that, yes, they are Mandalorian. Like, they are officially in canon now Mandalorian after the long debate of like 15 years of whether or not they're Mandalorian. It's officially confirmed. They are Mandalorian. Jango was a foundling, just as Din was. Doesn't matter what side you're on. He was a foundling. So everybody can put that to rest now. Because it is official. Jango and Boba are both Mandalorians. Boba being that his father was, so it trickles down the family line. Yes, complete liar in the Clone Wars. Thank you, Almec. What a douchebag! Complete douchebag. Yes, and honestly, going back to watch the Clone Wars now, that means so much more because of this episode of The Mandalorian. All of that, what's happening, means so much more, and again, it plays to this idea of what it means to be a Mandalorian. And it's going to come back into play so much in season 3, because it looks like essentially what was on Mandalore, what we saw in the Clone Wars, was a lie. And all of these different factions were created. And we're going to find that all out through these characters that Din's meeting. Boba, Bo-Katan, if he ever does meet up with someone like Sabine Wren. All of these characters are going to fill him in on the real history of Mandalore. Because what he was told is a complete lie. He was brought up in the Death Watch way, which are extremists, which are terrorists, and that's not the way that you get brought up. But he believes that's the way of the true Mandalore, when that isn't the case. And so it's going to be very, very interesting. Yes, exactly. And he was raised in a cult. He's going to realize that it was a cult. And that's why I think that the armor is going to be the big bad of the series eventually, because of that reason. Yep. It's really cool though, because all of this history of Mandalorian stuff is coming back into fold. And I've been saying it for like 10 years now. The one thing I want to see in Star Wars is Mandalore. It's like the one thing I've wanted to see. Mandalore, Mandalorians, and we're like getting engulfed with it now with Bo-Katan and Boba and Din. And it's so cool and refreshing because it's the first time we've ever really seen it in new canon. And to all of us new Star Wars fans, people who have been watching just the prequels, reading the stuff recently, this is all brand new to them. And the story of the Mandalorians is so rich and so vast. It's going to be really, really cool to see on screen. I'm so pumped.
I absolutely agree with everything that you just said right now, because it's what makes it so much fun for me also is having these types of conversations with someone who knows about it, because the way that you get excited and the feelings that I can feel come from how you're talking about Star Wars, I feel like that too. I get that feeling. I love that feeling. I might not know as much about it, but especially with The Mandalorian going on right now, I know that a lot of people were upset that sometimes it feels like you have to know everything or have to know some things to be able to enjoy it. I personally do not feel that way, especially because I know enough to get by. Like I said, last week I thought I knew everything. This week I couldn't tell you what Slave 1 was. Okay. So Star Wars gives me that feeling, and I love to be able to share it with someone who is way more well-versed in it. So
I'm so pumped. It excites me so much because I love seeing Jedi stuff. And until we see like the beginnings of the Jedi, I will say that the thing that I look forward to the most in Star Wars is the culture of the Mandalorians. It's so rich and different from everything we've seen in Star Wars. It very much plays in a very Native American way, samurai way, that way. And it's super, super exciting and different. And I will say this to what you love so much with Game of Thrones, this scene, the possibility of what could happen, it's going to play into the idea of Game of Thrones and Star Wars with clans, with history, dragons, that type of stuff. And it's going to be really, really cool.
Is that what this is? Is that what Ferris is talking about?
The Mythosaur is the famous dragon creature that the Mandalorians would ride. Yeah. It's this.
That's on there.
Yeah. It's this.
Yeah. Yes. Very, very cool. I'm looking at my notes and trying to see. The only other thing that I have on my notes is just Gideon with Grogu showing off the Darksaber. There's a lot of people saying that it sounded like he was taunting him with the
Definitely was.
Do you feel like Grogu has seen this before? Because that's the question that I've heard going around.
Maybe not the Darksaber, as you see a tail wagging in the background. Maybe not the Darksaber, but to him, it probably just looks like another version of a lightsaber. Mm-hmm. Being that he's a youngling, and being that he's very kind of muddled with who he is at this point. He doesn't really know who he is at this point. He's still very much figuring that out. It could just look like another lightsaber to him. But yeah, I think he was definitely taunting him and playing around with him. It seems like a Moff Gideon thing to do. Mm-hmm. And it plays to the character very well. I'm interested to see more of them together. And so, yeah, it definitely feels like something that Moff Gideon would do in that situation.
100%. I think so. I'm excited to see more of Moff Gideon. That was one of the biggest things for me last season was when the Darksaber actually popped out. I gasped because I knew what it was, and I was super.
Yep. I think we all did. Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun for me. I think that's it on my note. The tiny cuffs. I have a note on the tiny little cuff.
How do they make them that small, and why do they make them that small? They're that's tiny.
Why do you have teeny tiny cuffs?
Yeah.
Just looking at all of that stuff. Yeah. So that's pretty much it from going through the episode. That's what I noticed through. Those are the questions that I have as a Padawan asking a Master Jedi. Do you have anything from this episode for me that you felt like I should maybe pay attention more or should go into? We're getting into homework. Give me my homework, Jake.
So the homework that I would give you, which could very well not come into play. It's just a theory of mine. The Rook Cast situation. I do think that Rook Cast could be the armorer. It's a possibility that is very high. And the stuff that I would say to recommend with that. So obviously we see her in Clone Wars. She's Gar Saxon's second in command. So this recent season 7, we see the Darth Maul Mandalorian troopers. She's the one with the horns on her helmet. Nice. And a lot of people are theorizing that armor's horns is obviously a clear indication that she's Rook Cast. But I would also say, if you're interested, there's a Darth Maul comic book that is called The Son of Dathomir. And this is where Gar Saxon and Rook Cast actually break him out of prison. And in Clone Wars, if you remember the last time we saw Maul, he was actually taken by Palpatine. This is essentially a follow-up to that where they break him out. And this leads into season 7 of Clone Wars where he takes over Mandalore. And he gets that army behind him of Mandalorians who are serving him. But as far as this episode, it's tough because I don't know where it's exactly headed. And I would recommend something like Boba Fett stuff, but it's all legend stuff. I would say just get psyched. Just get super psyched for what's going to come because honestly, if we do see a Jedi come in, if Grogu did reach someone during that teleportation phase or whatever happened, we could see someone like Ezra come into play, which would be crazy. I know a lot of people are saying Luke Skywalker, but I personally don't want to see that. Huh?
Some people are saying Mace Windu.
And that's the theory that I dislike the most because it's no. Plus, if Mace Windu showed up, Boba Fett would be like, no. Like, remember, like Mace Windu chopped this dude's dad's head off. Like, no, duh. But yeah, there's not too much homework. The one that I'd recommend, if it ever does come into play, the Rookcast stuff is very interesting. I do hope the Armorer comes back. It's another good read. It's like a mini series. It was only like 4 or 5 issues or something like that. It's totally worth it. So I would just say get super pumped and just be excited because this is the best Star Wars we've had in a long, long time.
Yeah. Before we move on, I am going to shout out some more Streamlabs. Thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate it. From PC, my girl, get it, baby. Danny, so happy to see you going live. I don't like Star Wars. I still want to support. I appreciate you, girl. That's what this whole thing is for. If you're not into Star Wars or if you don't know very much about Star Wars, this is a safe conversation to have because I know nothing. I am Jon Snow. I'm going to forever, probably now, from now on, just try to tie in as many Game of Thrones references Star Wars videos to see how many times people notice. I am Jon Snow. I know nothing. So that's very much for anyone who is coming back. If you're watching this on the replay, like, comment, and subscribe. Seb, I just need 30-something more people to get me to 100, and I would really appreciate that. If you're watching this on the playback, that's what this episode is for. That's what the Padawan Chronicles is for. Helping someone learn more about Star Wars, especially if you want to. If you don't, it's cool. Love you, PC. Big shout out to William Harold also. Hello there. Hi, buddy. It's good to see you. Yay. So that's it from the Streamlabs. That's my homework. Rookcast. I love that.
Rookcast.
I'm definitely going to look into Rookcast. Before we get going, we are going to go here very soon. Just a quick little production note side of it. We really didn't get to talk a lot about the production side of this. Both you and I believe, are big movie fans. We're pretty much in that same space. So I think visually some things are very important to continuing on in the episodes. I love Robert Rodriguez. I'm not the most familiar with like an expansion of his work, but I do appreciate him as a director. This is my only opportunity to tell this story on the internet, so I'm going to tell this story. It's not a long story. I got to do hair at Robert Rodriguez's wedding. I'm a hairdresser. That's what I do by trade.
Nice.
The salon that I worked for was hired my old boss would do hair for his wife. I believe they're still married. I don't know, but I got to go and I got to do hair for the wedding.
That's awesome. Nice.
That's my 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon to Robert Rodriguez. So how did you feel about this episode? Because one thing that I did see a lot, and I want to know if you noticed this too, was the production. It was too sharp. The term that I kept hearing around was too sharp.
So I thought it was a little too clean is the word that I used. And it did look, and I know a lot of people are saying that just put like a slight filter over it. Don't make it don't make it look like it was literally shot in just like daylight with no cameras or anything like that, like on a phone or whatever. It didn't bother me while I was watching. After the fact, like, yeah, I thought of it, like, cool, sure. Didn't really bother me though, because so much good stuff was happening. Also, it was just the climate of the planet. Like, that's okay, fine. Doesn't really bother me. I thought Robert Rodriguez was the perfect choice for this episode. I couldn't be happier with him being the one to bring back Boba Fett on screen.
Yeah.
Because he's great at action. He's great at weaving in storytelling with the action. He obviously, because of his movies, he can get super violent at times too. We saw that with the Boba Fett action scenes. And it made me even more of a bigger believer that each director who has been placed with each episode this season is like the perfect choice. Like, it's just a perfect storm of these directors choosing these episodes, right? You have Peyton Reed with episode 2 being the horror one. You have Bryce Dallas Howard, who crushed it with the Bo-Katan episode. Carl Weathers with the Siege, directing a lot of himself, which makes sense. And Dave Filoni obviously doing Ahsoka, and so it makes sense. I think that it just works out perfectly. I'm super excited for the next 2 episodes, being Rick Famuyiwa and then Jon Favreau to finish it out. This season just really feels like a perfect storm. It really, really does.
Wasanaro in the chat. I think the point was to catch all of the action, not bury the lead.
I agree.
I do too. So this was actually, I know if anyone has seen the gallery or anything else on Disney Plus that shows the behind the scenes with the Mandalorian and the making of, they film it usually inside of this dome. I can't remember what they call
the volume.
The volume. This episode was not shot in the volume, right?
All outside. I'm sure maybe some scenes, but for the most part, they were somewhere shooting all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is super cool.
Yeah. I love that. And I thought that was going to be great. There's a question from Thrawn in here. Any clue on the runtimes of the next couple?
No, nothing yet. They usually release it like maybe the day of or the day before. If some site gets a scoop on the runtime, I wouldn't be surprised if they're kept pretty close to the chest on these because they're going to be so big. And I also wouldn't be surprised if the finale is the longest one we've had yet. Depending on how much they need to tell. That'll all depend on what the next episode looks like, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 2-part finale and that the final one is probably the longest one. Yeah, the gallery series is incredible, and I can't wait for season 2. I can't wait for the episode where they show us the making of Ahsoka. Cannot wait.
Oh yes, I definitely can't wait for that. I love the directors roundtable that they did. Also, yes. I can't wait to see that. I definitely want to hear that. I love what they're doing with the directors. Do you feel like this is going off of moving away really quickly? The titles of the episodes and the runtime. If you learn that before you watch the episode, do you feel like that spoils it for you a little bit, or is that something that you want to wait to find out until you actually watch the episode?
The runtime doesn't get me doesn't worry me too much. Like, it doesn't bother me. It's funny because I usually stay away from the titles, and they're not usually revealed until the episode is revealed. The Ahsoka one was different because it was so heavily speculated that Dave Filoni directing would obviously be the one to bring Ahsoka into live action. And that title episode was revealed like 6 days before the episode dropped. Like, it was caught on very early. But I get super excited because when the episode starts, you see the title of the episode and you're like, oh my God, like, what is happening? And specifically this last episode, when you see the tragedy pop up, I go,
thought it was the Razor Crest being blown up.
Well, and so to me, I first thought, I go, oh shit, what's going to happen? What is going to happen this episode? And so I get really excited because the titles are enough of a mystery to make me think outside of something like the Jedi. And I expect the final 2 to be very, very mysterious to keep us kind of thinking on what's happening.
Well, with the Jedi though, that was a very obvious.
That was a clear indication because Dave Filoni was directing. Yeah. And there's no other person in the world that should deserve to bring that character onto live action than Dave Filoni. And it didn't matter because we were all blown away because we weren't expecting to see her in the capacity we saw her. Yes. And she was the very first scene just absolutely wrecking shop.
I love that. Listen, like, for the very first shot and it's a fuck it. Yes, just give it to us right away. Thank you so much, Dave.
Well, and yeah, and for someone like me who, and I told you this earlier, but I think Ahsoka is the pure example of what a real Jedi should be and is. And so when I saw that, I lost my mind. I lost it.
I was very, very much waiting for the line, I am no Jedi, or I'm not a Jedi coming.
And that's what I would have loved to have seen that, but there's a possibility where we do see that in the future.
I think so too. I think maybe sorry, we're going into the Jedi, but I think maybe she's just trying to play her cards close to her chest and not really like give too much away to Din, especially because like if she can get into Grogu's mind, like what it would make sense that she can kind of get a feel for Din a little bit as well. So sorry, I just
no, you're fine. And I know someone commented it earlier. They were talking about Ahsoka and her search for Ezra and stuff like that. Don't forget that Dave Filoni played coy a little bit about where this exactly is in the timeline, and that the very end of Rebels could in fact take place after this. And so just stay tuned if maybe Thursday they announce an official Ahsoka series. So we'll see.
That's going to be fun and exciting. I immediately went to go buy the Thrawn book and the Ahsoka book after that last episode. And after this episode, I bought the encyclopedia because I needed to know more about the ships. It was the ships that really blew my brain because I couldn't believe that I really didn't recognize it, couldn't understand it. So I really want to know more about ships. So that's going to be my personal homework for myself. More ships. Yeah. All right. Well, this has been a fun conversation for me, Jake. I hope it was fun for you.
Oh, I loved it. It was awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate anyone who has a love for Star Wars and is respectful to anyone like me that is trying to get into Star Wars a little bit more. So I appreciate your time and your patience, Master Jedi.
Always. That's the first time that's ever been named by me. So thank you.
There you go. Yes, you are officially one of my Jedi trainers. Welcome to the first one. So welcome to the club. Thank you so much. Big shout out to everyone who has been with us all night long in the chat. Really, really appreciate you. If you enjoyed this, let me know. Like this video, comment on it after we go live. Let me know if you still want to see stuff like this. I know I started late with The Mandalorian, but I'll continue to do Mandalorian breakdowns like this with the perspective that we do. Also, later on this month, I will be continuing the book club for the Padawan book club. PJ Campbell has agreed, but we have not set on a date, and I'm putting it on air
Nice.
now to hold
Nice. Pressure him.
That's right. PJ is going to come on and talk with me about Aftermath, the first book in the trilogy series where we see Cobb Vanth. That was why I decided to do Aftermath. Everyone talked about it's going to be relevant again. Big shout out to Thrawn2K5 who's in the chat. Talking about Aftermath on Twitter. It's like immediately I have to start reading it. So I'm on life debt right now, but I am going to talk about Aftermath with PJ either sometime late this month or early next month. And then also, wow, I don't know why my alarm is going off for anything. That's crazy. And then also later on in the month, if anyone has been following me for quite some time, I'm sorry I don't have any graphics to put up to show all of this stuff, but I am going to be finally starting Watch the Book. That's what this channel is about. That's my personal love. It's where I talk about a book and its movie adaptations and just go through the similarities, differences, production notes, anything like that. And Maxwell Haddad will be joining me for that one. We're going to be over It's a Wonderful Life / The Greatest Gift. So that's the one that we're going to do, and we're going to do it the week of Christmas. So I'm pretty excited about that one. Nice. Yeah, Jake, let everyone know where you're at and what you got going on.
Yeah, I got a lot. Obviously, you guys all know me from a certain point of view, the Schmodown channel we got over there with myself, Brian, Jill, and Molly. You can find me on Twitter at Qui-Gon Jake. That's 2 N's. Someone else took the 1 N one before I did. I'm also on Apocalypse Movies, a movie podcast I've been doing for about 6 years now. Myself and a couple of buddies here local, we just talk movies and we do all kinds of fun things like fantasy drafts and watch along and stuff like that. And then I also do a Star Wars show myself. It's called The Whiskey Jedi, where we talk Star Wars and drink whiskey. And it's a great little combination that I've found, and it's a lot of fun. And so you can check me out there. It's my personal channel, Jake Berlin. There's not a lot on there other than that, but you can check that out there as well. So.
Yeah, there are some links for Jake inside of the description. I will make sure to put his personal channel on there as well. I love that name, Whiskey Jedi. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the Whiskey Jedi. Yeah,
I love that name. I think that's so great. Yay! So again, thank you so much to everyone. Really, truly appreciate it. I don't have like a sign off. I don't have like a title theme or anything like that. So we're just gonna say goodbye, and I'm gonna leave you with this very sweet image. This image is me and Jake right now. So enjoy. Y'all have a good night. Thank you so much. Bye.